All right, good morning, South Africa, and welcome to the webinar about post-pandemic talent retention. I can see the room is getting nice and full already with attendees who are diligently waiting for the hour of 11. So welcome, welcome. Yeah, please don't be shy. Use the chat and introduce yourself and tell us how warm it is where you are. It's pretty cold where I am in Joburg. Just make sure that when you do use the chat, you'll set your setting to everyone. So that means all your fellow attendees can also see it. Yeah, so we'd love to see who's there. We'll pop in. We'll start the official opening of the webinar just now in a minute or so. We'll just allow for a few more people to join. We had quite a lot of interest in this webinar because I think it's super topical. And then just now I'll also introduce Bandile, Michelle, and Portia to you as the great panelists. So if you've just joined in the last 30 seconds, please feel welcome, and also feel free to use the chat to introduce yourself. Good to see CP introducing, and we've got Robin there and lots of other people. Please make sure your settings in the chat box are set to everyone, which means everyone can join in the engagement. We'll talk about engagement probably quite a lot during this webinar, so let's be engaged. Let's see something else. Sungula, I think you may have joined the panel instead of as an attendee. I'll let him know offline. He's very welcome to join with. Sometimes it goes like that with Zoom settings. So that was our cameo from our CHRO community manager, Sungulu and Kabinda, who hosts most of these webinars. So I'm fortunate to be. Oh, and now I'm probably sharing my screen. I was just telling him that he was showing. Anyway, I think it's time. So let me stop sharing and let me. Now you'll see everyone who's on the panel a little bit bigger, and I'll do the official intro to the team, and we can kick off. So post-pandemic talent retention is the topic. How can we give employees whose perspectives around work have changed a reason to stay? Last year really marked the start of the Great Resignation, which has led many employees to re-evaluate their professional lives, including where and when they work. According to Workday's recent Future Forum survey, 78% of employees want location flexibility. That's a lot. And 95% want schedule flexibility. So let's call it everyone wants to have more flexibility in terms of when they work. It's against this context of redefined priorities that organizations have to engage with employees regarding the value proposition and overall employee experience. So we've got two very experienced HR leaders on the panel. Before I introduce them, I think we'll also really chat to them about retention. How do you keep those people that you really want to keep on board and make sure that this new, let's call it trend or new way of thinking among employees doesn't harm your business. Would be remiss of me not to thank Workday for making this webinar possible. Workday has been an incredible supporter of CHRO South Africa and the HR and Daba network for years already. So it's really fantastic to have that support this year as well and have Bandila on the call. We've got record numbers for this webinar in terms of attendees, so I think it's really a hot topic. So let me introduce the panelists. Portia Tokwane, Group CHRO at Dark Fiber Africa. Welcome and thanks for being here. We've got Michelle Chetty, until recently the HR boss at Unilever, now head of HR for Africa for Ocean and Logistics at global shipping company Maersk, who we all know from the big containers, but there's way more to it, Michelle told me. She also recently was interviewed for a very interesting article on chro.co.za about the obsession with job titles. So please check that out. And then we've got Bandile Dwili, a very experienced solution consultant at Workday. Yeah, and one of the only people on LinkedIn with sunglasses, Bandile. So that's also a good honor. So please, I've already said to the people who were here early, but please use the chat. Introduce yourself maybe in the next 5 minutes. Still later, as the topic goes along, please ask questions, make comments. We'll tackle all of those in the last 15 minutes. We'll promise to make good notes of them and make sure this is really an engaging session. For now, I'm going to hand over to Bandile, who will kick off the topic with a presentation of about 10 minutes around the Great Resignation and employee engagement, and then we'll come back for the panel discussion. Over to you, Bandile.
Good morning, everyone. Give me 1 second. It seems my sharing is share that.
I can see your slide fine, Bandile.
There we go. Cool. You can see them. I couldn't see them, Joe. So good morning, everyone. And thank you once again for joining us today. So one of the key themes I'd like for you to think about today is changing the narrative from human resources to human relationships. When we talk about the dynamics of engagement between the employer and the employee, I think you need to ask yourself, should HR be less transactional and more about relationships? Relationships usually start with an introduction. So let me introduce myself. My name is Bandile Kazankulu Floyd Chwili. It's not all on my ID, just Bandile Chwili is on my ID, but I do like to give my full name. So I've been in HR systems for the past 12 years. My experience has spanned across industries, geographies, and even systems. So today I'm a solution consultant at Workday, and my role is actually to advise our prospects on what could work best for their business from an HR perspective. So I'm a solutionist. I've been asked today to start the session with some key findings from our Peakon Employee Expectation Survey report commissioned by Workday in 2021, early 2021. So Workday commissioned Yonder Consulting to conduct research earlier in 2021 to understand employee sentiments across Europe and South Africa during COVID-19. Well, my focus today is going to be on South Africa and specifically the South Africa numbers. So South Africa was the first country outside of Europe to conduct this research. We conducted about a little over 1,000 surveys amongst employees below the director level were sent, and the respondents work for organizations with more than 250 employees. So the research showed a few things. So workplaces have seen some major economic and social, environmental, and also technological changes. There was an acceleration and some trends, including remote working, shifting employee expectations, learning and development, purpose and belonging at work, and even employee well-being. So seismic change has been what many organizations have been going through since the COVID-19 pandemic started. So there's new ways of working where people are actually working from home, and more recently, we're seeing people actually starting to go back to the office. Right. So the fairly new networking, new working arrangements such as hybrid working structures are being seen in organizations. So organizations have to start asking themselves, is it possible to attract and retain talent while you still have the instructive approach to your employment agreement? So things like telling an employee you've got to work from 8 o'clock to 4:30, for instance. All right. So let's look at some key figures that may help us answer this question. So of our respondents, 80% work from home. All right, how do you start to bring these employees back after 2 years of working in their pajamas, shorts, flip-flops, without upsetting their daily lives? I can show you what shoes I'm wearing today. It'll speak volumes. All right. 53% struggle to motivate themselves. So how do you start to re-engage with employees to motivate them without micromanaging them? Right. And if you look at the last numbers, that 58% believe that their leaders are not actually prioritizing their health and well-being, right? So many organizations through this pandemic have seen an increase in productivity, but this may be because switching off while working from home hasn't really been the norm. So I, for instance, can wake up at 4:30 in the morning and work through till maybe 6, 7 o'clock. At what point do I actually switch off, right? So this is directly affecting the health and well-being of employees. Could this be the reason to ask employees to come back to the office? So an unfortunate consequence of it is that South African businesses are starting to see signs of resignations from key talent. The same report found that half the employees said that they're looking to have other jobs within the next 12 months. So if you think about this from an employee retention perspective, this is not good, right? According to a recent Business Insider article, South Africa's version of the Great Resignation is quite different to the rest of the world. So employee turnover has increased by around 16% in all sectors. Organizations are actually battling to attract and retain existing talent. It would be interesting to hear from Portia and Michelle what these numbers look like from a dark fiber or a Maersk perspective. So now more than ever, the needs of employees are incredibly important if you actually want to retain them, specifically the skilled individuals. So some key questions is to ask yourself as organizations is, what are organizations doing to retain their top talent? Are employees part of the organizational strategies? Last question would be, how can we be more proactive in our approach to keeping that talent? Workday's approach to this is what we call it's Workday Peak on Employee Voice. Right? It's a continuous listening platform that captures real-time employee sentiment, facilitates ongoing feedback, and provides a personalized perspective of recommendation for action. So you think about having that more proactive, what I spoke about earlier, having relationships between HR and your employees, relationship between the employee and the employer. How do you actively keep this this engagement? Traditionally, I know a lot of organizations would do their engagement surveys, let's say every 6 months or every year. All right, is that not too late? So you start thinking about some of these things you do in organization in terms of how often you do them and what you do and how often you do them. So why this is important is that you don't need to just listen to employees, but you also actually need time to act, right? So the frequency of how often you listen to employees actually works. And this is where Workday Peak on Employee Voice actually helps. So here's a quote from an executive coach and advisor, Diana Thomas. She speaks to how important it is to have active listening and action in order to actually get the best out of your workforce and also retain them. And with that, I'd like to thank you for listening and invite you to engage with Portia Takwane, Michelle Chetty, Joel Rurik, and myself. Hopefully, Portia and Michelle will be willing to share their strategies on employee retention as well as the employee attraction. Joel, hand over back to you.
Thanks a lot, Bandile. That was snappy and insightful and got us off on the right foot. So I really appreciate that. Yeah, maybe Portia, let me start with you. What Bandile just showed, sort of the trends, definitely some signs of resignation, but also some complications around the South African situation. What has been your experience in the last 2 years?
Yeah, thank you, Joel. And thank you, Bandile, for that insightful share. So we also use Peakon for our service. So really not surprised at the results that you're sharing. We really seeing similar trends in our business. I would say, especially around the talent retention, it's not really about COVID, post-COVID strategy changes that are required. I think COVID just forced us as businesses to slow down, be more aware of our environment, and be more open to listening. Listen more to the business, listen more to the people, and take a step back to realize and act on what really matters, in business. So there's quite a few strategies. I think I'll share that as we continue with the conversation. So there's quite a few strategies and key things that we have identified as a business, and that we're focusing on.
And are you noticing that people are leaving your business in particular because of flexibility reasons? They're looking for more flexibility in terms of time or in terms of location, or is that not really an issue in your environment, Portia?
It really is. I mean, when COVID started, we actually started to have the conversation of flexibility before COVID. But there was always hesitancy. There's a traditional mode of leadership presenteeism. So when COVID started, we started to see a lot of appreciation. Oh, finally, I can take my child to school. Finally, I work best at night. I don't need to be worried about traffic. I can prepare a meal for my family and still get work done. So there's a lot of appreciation from employees. We also ran a survey, on what the sentiments would be on a hybrid model, and majority of our employees, they prefer this model. We have a small percentage that are just diehard, fans of wanting to come to the office. As soon as level 5 ended, they were here, every single day since then, and so we appreciate, that population of our employees, but we also appreciate the population of employees that prefer more of a flexible working structure, and we're accommodating all of that.
Okay, thanks, Portia. Maybe when moving over to you, Michelle, just the background for the audience. Obviously, you've had a lot of experience in a global environment, right? First at Unilever, and then recently you've moved to Maersk, both global organizations that are maybe a little bit differently and harder hit potentially by the Great Resignation. What have you picked up so far, and maybe you can also give us your African perspective there.
Yeah, thank you, Joel. And maybe it's also pressing for me to share personal experience. Of course, I made a career change after 23 years, and it happened to be around the same time that this conversation on the Great Resignation was going on. So you can imagine, people reflecting on that. And I must be really honest and say, what happened with COVID was traumatic. I mean, it was really traumatic for all of us. I mean, it was jolting, uncertain. We saw loss of lives right around us in our family environments, in our friendships, and so forth like that. And we mustn't underestimate a change like that in itself. And so it's a life change and not necessarily related directly to work, right? I think that's the first thing that I want to say is let's just sit back and acknowledge and not try to move past that trauma too quickly to understand. And I think when big life changes like that happens, it's quite normal to sit back and say, let me evaluate everything that's going on. And I certainly did that. I certainly said, I have a wonderful career at Unilever. Things are going well for me. In fact, I was prospected for a job at the end of the year to go abroad, which, would have felt like quite a proposition for me early on. And then I had to evaluate whether indeed that remained a proposition for me. Was it really what I wanted? And I started looking at all sorts of factors, which Bandile's just highlighted now. You start looking at your well-being factors, your family situation. You start looking at a proposition and what is in it for you for a career. And I think, quite honestly, if you sat with yourselves and everyone on this call, you probably did that to some extent or the other during this period of time. So I think that is normal, and that will probably continue. And why will it continue? Because we're seeing the level of uncertainty, the level of change in our environments continue. So it may not be COVID, but something else will cause us to constantly reflect. So I think as HR practitioners, we need to become comfortable with our employees constantly re-evaluating their propositions. It makes it more complex for us, but it's certainly something that people are starting to do. And I think because of that, when we understand that, then some of the coping mechanisms of staying in touch with employees and engaging them on their true motivators comes to the fore again. I'm sure many of you have been through motivation theory and understand that well. So when we talk about employee engagement surveys, actually what we're talking about is motivation theory at the heart of it. And are we truly connected with what our employees are saying and what they want from us, and can we respond to that? But I think we need to also show ourselves kindness as organizations, because the Great Resignation has affected everyone, right? So what we need to say, it's not always that people are running away from your organization, but they're probably running towards something that they hadn't in the past taken time to fully evaluate. And that's okay. So my proposition as we go on with this conversation is to say, what does normalization of this trend look like? And how do we hope to attract talent back, if we so wish, back into our organizations or back into the ecosystem, if that makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely, Michelle. And thanks for that personal example as well. I think what I've already picked up from all of you is obviously listening, and kindness is a beautiful point as well, which doesn't always reach the top of the lists of business hacks. So it's a good one. I'm just going to throw this question in there, Portia, specifically aimed at you, because because we're talking about listening, right? And we're talking about retention. So often we then also come to talk about hybrid models. And let's just say, we're all struggling. Like, there is no business who has figured out hybrid working. Let's be honest. We all try different things, and we try to make it work. So the question really, Portia, is how have you? What's your approach at this stage, and how did you communicate that with the business? And I think that the communication part is also an important part.
Yeah. So, can I just first touch on what you mentioned about listening and linking to what Michelle mentioned as well. I think one of the top realizations that we've had is that we really need to bring the human back into leadership. And we're finding that, I don't know if it's the shock of the pandemic, but there's less tolerance on bad leadership, in business. I've certainly seen some key people that we don't want to lose. A person that will come and say, no, I cannot work with this leader. I'm leaving for that reason. I don't have another job. I'll figure it out. So really, people are looking for great leaders. I think that's quite critical. It's one of the fundamental things. And I don't know if those are followers of Simon Sinek. You would have heard him say that leadership is not about rank. It's not about rank to be achieved. It's a responsibility to see those around us rise. And as leaders, we're not responsible for results. We're responsible for the people, and the people are in turn responsible for the results. So this period has really gotten us to come back and treat each other, everybody, at a human level. I mentioned in a conversation that we had that, seeing the suffering happening across the board, the losses in everybody's families. It didn't discriminate on the rich and the poor and the CEOs and the person who's sweeping, your office. Everybody were all in the same boat. So this experience got us to come back and look at what really matters. How do we create meaning? How do we create vision? And how do we create a safety haven for the people that work for us? So that for me is quite fundamental. The point on flexibility, it was quite interesting, because there was this haste to, okay, this lockdown must end quick. People must get back to the office. We need people to connect. We tried it. Everybody back to the office on this day. People come back. Day 2, day 3, I think, we're sitting in a board meeting, and we get called out to say, hey, somebody just tested positive. We need to evacuate the building, So we had to evacuate the building immediately and said, okay, we need to rethink what we're doing here. So we had to really go back to the drawing board and communicate. We did a survey. We ran weekly town halls, since 2020. Every single week, we don't miss a bit. And we had to open, conversations, say, okay, what would work best for us? So we have opted to a 3-day. So every person, it's not a must, it depends on the deliverables. And the team decides, what works best for them. But a condition that we put out there is if people can be in the office 3 times a week, the team will see what works best for them. And most critical, we looking at teams that collaborate together. So if a sales team needs maybe a service delivery team or a networks team, they align to be at the office, around the same days. So we've been doing this since early about May last year, and it's been working well for us. So, but we keep the conversations open. We've had employees that say, I am looking after a family member who's not well. I just absolutely cannot come to the office. And they don't. I'm one of those who was looking after a terminally ill family member from beginning of the year. I've only come back to the office today, so we've been quite flexible, as long as people are, we've got open communication, and we're clear on what needs to be delivered, and they support, across the business in meeting our deliverables.
Thanks, Portia. Bandila, do you want to chip in?
Yeah, Portia, I'm hoping we're not the reason you're in the office today.
I missed my team. I was away for quite a long time.
Yeah, so one of the key things that you mentioned, Portia, and I like your approach to what you've done in terms of bringing employees back. We're seeing some organizations making that mistake of saying employees need to come back at this particular, every or 3 days a week, but they're forced to actually come back. You're not giving employees the option. What you are doing differently is actually giving employees the option. It's the same thing Workday did for us, Workday South Africa specifically like it. So I was one of the people pushing for us to come back to the office. It's supposed to be an anonymous survey, but I was pushing and saying we need to come back to the office. But it's still an option. They said, look, office is open now, but it's an option for you how often you want to come in, when you want to come in. So I don't mind coming in once or twice a week to the office, because it's an option for me. It's not an instruction to say come in on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, at this particular time. And I think that's important for a lot of employees. Some people have time to actually, like he has mentioned, take their kids to school, pick their kids up from school, and still be productive, if not a lot more productive. What I worry about, however, is the added consequence of that. What I spoke about earlier is the inability to switch off. What have you done for your employees in terms of giving them the ability or pushing them to actually switch off at times? Because some organizations love productivity, but are you able to actually monitor and say to employees, I love the fact that you're productive, but are you switching off? Are you more productive because you're working 12 hours as opposed to the 8 hours you used to work? And interestingly enough, though, a lot of employees don't even realize that pre-COVID, they may have actually been working 12 hours without realizing they're working 12 hours, because they spend 2 hours in traffic going to work, spend 2 hours going back, and they spend 8 hours at the office. But can you give employees that ability to actually switch off, while they're working from home? For me, that's a key question.
Thanks, Bandile. I think, Michelle, when we chatted in preparation, you said traditionally retention strategies are often quite short-term focused. And that is obviously not an ideal situation in sort of the uncertain times that we are now. How do you see that? Maybe can you elaborate on that point a bit, and how are things organized at MESC, and what are sort of the things that you think people can learn from?
Yeah, thank you, Joel. And if I can just, before I answer that question, just add one thing to the conversation on hybrid working. My reflection, and I've gone through this curve of learning exactly like Bandile and Portia and many of you, is for me, don't ask employees to come back to the office. Don't even enter that discussion. That's where I'm at right now. Rather reflect on what will give them a reason to want to come back, and to want to come back flexibly. Of course, there will never be a time where we're going to come back full-time in the office or full-time work from home. But what is the reason for them to want to come back? And that has to be around team engagement, collaboration, coming together on a common problem to solve or a common purpose. And so the motivation to come back must be your primary goal. Not the act of coming back, not the act of 3 days or whatever the case is. So just reframe why people would want to come back, and create that drive. So I just wanted to say that. In terms of my reflections of what, and I know I've been blown away by this organization, MERSC, and my big reflection on what is keeping people here and keeping people excited and motivated. The first reflection that I have is that we're a big global organization that is completely reinventing itself. It's taken all of the dynamism of this change, and it's saying we want to get at the forefront. So what was traditionally known as an ocean business, shipping business, which can sound quite rudimentary in its tone, is now becoming a digital end-to-end logistics and services business. It's going to be powered by digitization, automation, artificial intelligence, and some exciting stuff. So, we're hiring solution engineers and digital natives and so forth. So it's a super exciting proposition that's happening. And the reason I say that is because ask yourselves, what are your organizations doing to reinvent itself using the pandemic as a catalyst for change, right? The second thing is, are they doing so with a big purpose? Are they doing so with a heart to actually change the environment, change the communities in which they work? And is that a compelling reason enough? Because if those two factors are not at play, then what you are doing is the short term. You're going to be working on the short-term retention strategies. You're going to go name by name who's most at risk, and you're going to put a bonus in place to keep that person. But if you are thinking, where's this organization going? What is its purpose, and who are its leaders? Do I want to follow these leaders? Are they new age leaders? Are they compassionate? Are they empathetic? Are they inspirational? Then I think you've got a retention strategy in the making. And I shared with you, Joel, when we spoke, one of the things I find phenomenal here is truly caring about engagement. So engagement is like our biggest thing in culture at the moment. It's the only thing that we really truly measure. And when we know employees are engaged, we know that they will give their full self. We know that they have psychological safety to speak up. And we know that they're going to solution big problems with us, together with us, and collaborate with us. When we see the engagement scores going down, it's often those three things that are also impacted by it. So I think for me, that's my reflections on what I think is working for us from a retention point of view.
Right, I just want to pick on, and I'm bringing the people from the chat in earlier than I was planning to, but it's nice to have a community conversation, right? Kuki Naidu was saying, in the practical sense, some businesses have people that have to work in a location, right? And I think Dark Fiber Africa and Maersk are no different there, whereas others don't. And what she's noticing is that people that have to work in a location get a bit frustrated by that, and they're actually the ones who start looking for other jobs, potentially in another industry, or maybe even in other completely different work. So they can also get that freedom, so to say. Do you? I don't know who wants to take the question, but do you have something in place that tackles that?
I think it's a good thing, Joel. I think it's a good thing that people who have been restricted by a job that has potentially a location or a shift that they've got to be on or so forth, are now also themselves reevaluating, what other experiences do I want? What do I want to put on my CV? What do I want to be known for? And they're elevating themselves. Now, that might mean sometimes when they go and apply for jobs that they've got to upskill themselves to get into other jobs, or they've got to go back to studying, which is great. But for me, that's a renewal, right? That's the upliftment of skills. There will always be people who will take those jobs and be happy with a strict location and whatever the case is. But for me, this gives an opportunity for everybody to reevaluate and say, actually, I want something new for my life. I want something different and giving me more value. So for me, to be honest, I would embrace it.
Okay. It's a much more relaxed, and I'm going to go to you now, Portia, but it's a much more relaxed approach to retention, right? It's not about like retaining every single individual necessarily in the organization. It's about growing with your people and also getting new people in, which is an interesting take on it. Portia?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have technicians in our environment who have to be on site. And so what we have seen is there's technicians who it's their passion, it's their job. They love it. They love being on site, fixing our network, and there's those that you find that they got into the job because they probably didn't have other options, or that was the best opportunity they can get at that time. Those are the ones that would come to us and say, but I would rather be in an office. I would rather be having this flexible working structure, participating in it. And we have those conversations. Where do you really want to see your career? What are your interests? What are your passions? What do you want us to expose you to? Is it an element of studying for something? We fund for you to upskill yourself. We would give you time to split your working hours and spend time in a department, learn what that department does, and then start, helping you to move into those type of environments that will give you the flexibility. But we have not had a situation where there's just, outright, unhappiness that, oh, we don't want, the jobs that force us to be on site. We having those open conversations with our teams.
Yeah, if I can just add, Joel, solutions can come in many forms. Sometimes, we do require our technical support and our frontline employees to be on the job. At Unilever, it was our factory employees. At Maersk, it's our seafarers. And it is, yes, number one, their passion that keeps them there, right? And that they want to, and it's how we value those roles as well, how we talk up those roles and the importance of those roles to our business strategy and our business success, right? And showing value. But there have been some solutions that have come out of that, right? So for example, at the moment, our team are looking at the seafarers and their schedules and their cycles of when they get time off. And what COVID has prompted in this whole hybrid working is, are we doing enough to give the seafarers significant enough time period to go home to family and have meaningful time with family? So it's not that they will work less, but the schedules will change to give them more significant time with family and then more significant time back at sea. So whatever your business is, think about what is a hybrid solution within that. It's not that they have to work less or they have to change location, but it's maybe you have to think the way you are designing their schedules could be something different.
Just to add to that, Jewel, I'd like to, I think, comment on both what Michelle and Portia mentioned. Key things I noticed from their approaches is one of the things is actually being able to look at your current system and say, is there an opportunity to change or alter the system so that you're still productive but can still work. The other thing as well is still speaking to retention. Just because an employee does not want to be in a particular position that they're in now in the organization, it doesn't mean you have to let them go. Is there an opportunity to retain them within your organization? How much better if an employee has been in your organization for 10, 15 years and they already know your organization, from the point of coming into the gate to basically everything that happens in an organization, is there not an opportunity to retain that employee, but in a different position within the organization? Are you giving opportunities within your organizations the opportunity to grow? And by that by virtue of that, are you then giving them opportunity? Are you giving yourself the opportunity to actually retain those very employees?
Yeah, thanks, Mandela. Then Portia, I think when we chatted, you mentioned sort of picked on 4 key aspects of retaining good people. We spoke about good leaders already. We spoke about flexibility. Other points that you picked out were obviously career opportunities, but then also long-term wealth. What are the benefits, etc. So what often happens when we jump on an HR webinar, we talk about everything HR because everything ties together, right?
It does, absolutely.
Which is normal, I think. But talk to us a little bit about that, what you've seen in terms of what employees want.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we're seeing is really nothing new, right? We've had for the longest time, in exit interviews, or if you attracting talent, why did you leave this company? Because there was no career growth, why are you intending to leave? Are you leaving or are you going? Are you going somewhere? Which one is it? I'm leaving because I don't see career growth. So we've also seen this in our previous Pick and Service that, I've been doing this job for 6 years. I don't see what else is next in my career. So we've had to really think differently, about the concept of career growth. Is it about growing, within the layers, of the organization, functional growth? What is it? And we've had to, open conversations and look at, what does it mean for an individual? As HR professionals, we for the longest time got lost into this career pathing concept. If somebody comes into HR, you're going to be a practitioner, you're going to be a generalist, you're going to be, this linear, career pathing approach. And we have to say, what does growth mean for individuals? And what is possible within the organization? So we've seen a lot of opportunities for people to grow outside their functional areas. I think previously there was no openness towards that. So now there's more openness to say, okay, my talents, my natural talents, I've got into this job, yes, but I've seen that I'm much more passionate and excited to learn about something that's happening in a different functional area. What are the core skills that are required in that functional area? Okay, let us work, on giving you those skills. So we've seen people completely reinventing their careers within the business, or within the group, the opcos that we have. So that is quite key. And we've seen that that openness to say grow outside your core function. It has brought up a new leash of life and commitment, to the business. Let me just talk on long-term wealth as well, because this is practical experiences that we've been having recently. We've also seen, the absolute key people that we want to keep in the business coming to renegotiate their packages. In the past, you negotiate when you get hired, and then you wait for your annual increase and whatever incentive schemes that we give you, and that's it. But we've seen, I think the thought, what Michelle said, that the pandemic has really gotten people to reevaluate their lives and what do they want, what is critical, what is key for them and their families, and people have realized that, geez, have we really been doing enough, in terms of their financial health? Do we have clear long-term wealth strategies? Are we really earning what we are worth? So they're recognizing their worth and they're coming and say, listen, we need to renegotiate the package. Initially we were a bit, no, but you realize that we cannot do without this talent, and we've opened the conversations. A major move that we made in the last year, I think towards end of 2020, we have had to get a board approval to retire a traditional LTIP scheme, because we had a lot of our key talent that have got direct impact on our strategies wanting to participate, who could not participate because of eligibility rules. So we've had to retire an old scheme and introduce new scheme that goes across the entire organization, not dependent on the eligibility criteria of grades, etc. Across the entire organization, identifying who are those key talents that have got a clear and direct impact on the strategy across the functions. So it's something that was like, a bit of a shock to the system at first, but it was embraced, and we've got those group of individuals that are participating in the scheme, a renewed, sense of, I'd say, appreciation for the business and for the leaders to say, you know what, you truly do recognize the value that we bring in the business, and you do see us participating in the long-term wealth creation of the business. So I'm really encouraging the business community to shift, their focus in conversations around compensation, around wealth creation, wealth sharing, with employees. Jobs are no longer a favor these days. It's quite obvious that, the talent that you want to keep is not easy to find out there. It's very difficult to find and retain good talent, and we really need to have a different approach.
Yeah, I'm curious, Michelle, as well. Has it also sort of put more focus on who are those key people because you can have two people coming to you and say they want to move to Knysna and they want to work at midnight and they want a pension plan. But for the one person, the answer might be yes, and for the other person, the answer might be no, right? So I guess it's really sharpened that discussion as well.
Yeah, it's a really tough one. And my experience is that leaders panic when it comes to that, when that realization that this person has understood their marketability and it's clicked for them. And then the leader panics and says, what do we do now? Can we give a retention bonus? Can we up the salary by 5%? Can we do this? And for me, those are all reactive stances that we take. And they run the risk of creating or disrupting equity and fairness in the workplace. And so I'm always extremely cautious about those reactionary approaches. What we should have been doing is monitoring upfront, our fairness in pay and our practices and so forth. And that's where data comes to the fore. And are we showing our business and our leaders data soon enough to say, hey, some of our individuals falling behind our pay scales, or we haven't looked at recognizing somebody in some way for great work that they've done or so forth. So for me, when it comes to the point where we've already realized somebody wants to leave, or they've had to come to us and tell us, it's too late. And often whatever you do there is going to have a broader reaction, because guess what? They have at least 10 friends in the business. And if they get something out of the business at that point, they're going to tell their 10 friends and you got 10 problems on your hands. So I really caution against that. Reward is important. It's a hygiene factor, and therefore treat everybody fairly against principles that your organization has set. Test those principles for fairness and then stick to those principles. I would much rather talk about what is the proposition for this individual in a broader sense. And this is where Portia's right. You know, when people come to us and say, you know, they're not having career enhancement, if we cannot talk to people about what career experiences look like for them and what actually builds their career towards something richer, which is in line with their aspirations, they're obviously going to use the hygiene factor, because it's very hard to express career as you reason holistically. So they'll come down to the hygiene factors. Not that it's not important, but it will be the reason. And unless people have great psychological safety, unless people can really tell you the truth, how often is it that people have left our organization and we try to do an exit interview with them? And we know from history as HR, we know they've been having difficulty with a line manager, or they've been having difficulty with this added workload that we've given them. They've been speaking up on it for additional resources, and we don't address the issue. And then when they exit the business, they don't tell us that's the reason. They tell us, oh, I managed to find a job and it was 20% increase in my salary, and or it was a career. So they give you what the proposition of the new job is, but they don't tell you why they are truly leaving. So I think investing time in truly listening, and it comes back to that skill of listening, tuning in and not defending it, and then finding the bigger solutions. And you'll see a trend in what I'm saying. Don't react to individual cases. Look at the trends and look at what is happening and find longer term, systemic and sustainable solutions to that.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a super interesting and actually it's not easy, right? Like we're talking about it for about 45 minutes now, and I think the deeper we go into it, the more we realize this is a very tricky subject, and not something that we'll get right just by looking it up in a book or even just by listening to someone who's done stuff. It's also about trial and error, and admitting that that's something that we tried half a year ago even. Is not working anymore, and we'll try something else, but we're doing it with the people. Maybe just quickly about Portia's point, obviously, about career growth, and your point, Michelle, about let's not focus on job titles. How do you make people feel appreciated without that focus on job titles? Because it's such a traditional way of showing people that they matter, right? Okay, you were a manager, now you are a senior manager. And then after that, you are another thing, a vice president.
Yeah. I mean, look out for my article in CHRO soon. It's very tongue-in-cheek. And the article is written really for leaders, and many of you lead teams and so forth. And the notion of it is that if you are so obsessed with your job title, then what you are trying to do is have positional leadership. And I don't think positional leadership has a place in this new order that we're experiencing. I think it has to be inspirational leadership. It has to be servant leadership. So on the one hand, leaders' new roles is to inspire and to create the vision and really say where we are headed and get people believing in that vision. And the other hand is to say, okay, now that I've shared the vision, how do I serve you to be able to deliver on that vision? When we obsess over job titles, we create this hierarchical approach of climbing ladders and so forth like that. And then what happens there is that we get obsessed with the titles and not really whether we're playing the role of servant leaders or we're truly inspiring. So really that's my goal, is that everybody will, not that these are not important factors. Of course, we have job leveling and these are important organization design principles. But I think the way we've now said, okay, maybe we make him senior, or maybe we say, he's a group something, or maybe we say, and then we add these extra words, but actually we don't systemically change what the individual does. And what that does over time, it erodes the potential of an individual. They don't go outside their boundaries now. This is my job title, so I don't want to interfere with anything else. So they don't expand their boundaries. That's number one, which then makes their potential limited. And number two, they don't connect with their purpose on why am I here? What's my true? And I often talk, when I was given the VP title at Unity, was Vice President, Human Resources, Unilever Africa. It was so long to even say. So I just started calling myself the people escalator. For me, the people escalator did more for my career than their job title. Every day I woke up and I asked myself one question: am I enhancing the growth and potential of the individuals in my remit, or am I not? And everything I did had to be about enhancing people around me. So that comes to the purpose. And so that's really what I mean when you really want to connect people and you want to retain them, draw them to your purpose, draw them to their own purpose, and then watch the magic happen.
Thanks, Michelle. We had a question pop up in the Q&A section about exit interviews, and you've both touched on it, but I'd just like your take here. The question is basically summarized: are they even effective? Is it, and when you're doing an exit interview, it's generally too late, right? A little bit to your point, Michelle. But are they effective in terms of getting good insights, things that you can then do something with, and maybe prevent a person like that leaving, or maybe concluding that it was right that that person was leaving? What do you feel, Portia?
It depends on the environment that you've created, right? Whether they're effective or not, if the environment is not such that is engaged, collaborative, there's been ongoing stay interviews, even before we talk about an exit interview. By the time the person resigns, you knew that they were going to resign because you've been having those open conversations. And the exit interview would just be lamenting what you've already known if you were doing those stay interviews properly, or you're having those ongoing engagements properly. But in our environment, they are assisting us. We keeping up, with the trends, with the insights that we're getting, and coming back to say, what are the things that are we still struggling with, especially as leaders. I think the biggest challenges are around the leadership area. So what is it that we're still not, taking seriously out of the conversations that we're having with employees? Where do we still need to make some big shifts? And this gives us the backing data. So we do those interviews just before a person leaves the organization, and then we do them again a month after they've left, when they've calmed down, they've disconnected, they've possibly started a new relationship, and hindsight is a fantastic gift for them. So yeah, they're useless if it's a traditional, just top, exercise. We tick the box that we've done this, and we file them somewhere where we never get to gain anything from the insights.
Absolutely. Yeah, I thought maybe we were getting towards the end of this webinar, and Michelle has very openly shared that as part of this sort of recalibration, she changed jobs. So I'm just going to put Bandile and Portia on the spot quickly and ask them, did you guys, what has it done with you personally? You guys didn't change jobs. Did you think about these things? Did you think about what is it that keeps me here, or is it something that is happening in the outside world and that does not touch you? I don't know. Bandile, do you want to go first?
Joel, are you asking? Did I have ever considered moving jobs? Or
Yeah, this is sort of what we've seen through COVID now. There's obviously been reasons for you not to make the leap that Michelle made, and so I'm keen just from experience to hear what those were, because we've been touching on that from a theoretical basis.
So interestingly, Joel, I did move during COVID. I actually moved to Workday during COVID. But one of the key things that happened for me, and speaking to the exit interviews, there was an exit interview, and I think it was sort of a retention interview. They tried to retain me in my previous role, and I immediately, when I told the managers that was trying to retain me, dude, I'm not moving because I'm getting more money. I'm actually moving for exactly the same salary. He immediately stopped there and he said, all right, dude, look, there's nothing else I can do to retain you, because I know as soon as you say to me, I don't, you're not moving because of your salary. It's something that we should have picked up a long time ago. So for me, it was easy to move, purely because there were certain things that should have been picked up while I was at my previous organization that weren't picked up. And I think that's where active listening comes in. You speak about these things only being caught at an exit interview. It's for me, I'm not a fan of exit interviews. I think they work to a certain extent, to pick up on certain trends in the organization. But I think I'm more of a fan of active listening, continuously listening to your workforce, understanding what are the key things that are key topics that are coming out of your of all of your employees, of your employee surveys, of your engagement surveys. If there's an issue with toilets not being clean, are you going to be able to pick that up, or do you only want to pick that up at the end when people are resigning? You want to know that somebody's actually resigned because the toilets are never clean. It sounds like a weird reason, but there are people who actually look at such things. I know a few friends who have wanted to resign from their workplaces because the toilets weren't clean, specifically females. They want to leave because the toilets are not clean. So if you can pick those things up through active listening, I think that's it'll be incredibly important for organizations. Don't pick things up late, because by the time you pick them up, now you have to start thinking about the cost of recruiting, the cost of not just recruiting, but the cost of actually onboarding this particular employee. To onboard an employee, some organizations may take 6 months to onboard employees. Think about those added costs of losing an employee. Then think about how much less it's going to cost you to retain those employees purely through active listening. Pick up a trend and you fix that trend. For me, I'd be curious from Michelle and Portia to understand what differences. Have you seen a difference, for instance? And I know, Portia, you mentioned that you use Peakon, and I know one of the key things with Peakon is anonymous surveys, anonymous continuous surveys, right? Do you think is a difference between having the surveys being anonymous so that you pick up the true true issues in your organizations, or are you able to pick up the things that are happening in the organization without having the surveys as anonymous?
Yeah. Okay, I want to see if I'm not muted. We actually did that experiment when COVID, before COVID. We saw that there was questions of is Peakon really anonymous, So we had to ask ourselves, why are employees concerned on whether the system is really anonymous or not, and we did a lot of work around culture, a lot of communication. That's why I mentioned that we've been doing weekly town halls, and the reason previously, once a month town hall, and which is very mechanical, it was not a two-way engagement, and I think being able to plug onto the system made it easier, to have the two-way conversation. We initially saw a lot of comments coming as anonymous. We had as anonymous, and this question, that question, and then we opened the conversation. What is happening in the environment? Why do people feel that we as EXCO, we feel that we're very transparent, we're very open. As comments come, we act on them to show, that listen, we are co-creating the kind of environment that we want here. So we went through a period where we really questioning ourselves and having those conversations with the business of what is it that we need to work on to create that trust of open conversations, trust that whatever you come up with, whatever it may be, there is safety, there's a safety, we hold a space for you, to feel safe to bring whatever concern or issue that can be. And we moved towards transitioning out of this anonymous platform.
I'm not sure I understand.
Siri, sorry.
We all with you, Portia. Don't worry.
Siri is listening in. Let me just switch that off. So we went into the phase where we had to transition out of, an anonymous platform, working together with the employees, and we found that there was absolutely no change in how they were communicating. They bring ideas, questioning, business decisions, so it depends on the environment. Let me put it that way. If the environment is such that, you know, we've created that openness, we've created the trust, we working towards one vision, one purpose, there's absolutely no reason why employees should want to hide behind the system and not come out and say, this is my issue, or this manager speaks like this. We are seeing this trend in this department that goes against what you guys at EXCO are saying. So I think that is where the work is required. Work on the culture of the organization, and then everything else is going to take care of itself. Yeah. And to come to your question, Joel, about staying, living, I think for me, yeah.
No, you haven't really, but I was going to tell you you're safe by the time, but if you can give it to us in 20 seconds, then it's okay.
It's okay. I would say the jury's out. You know, the jury's out for me. I think similar to Michelle, I've been going through a lot of reflection. You know, who am I really? What really makes me tick? Would I see myself still doing this for the next 20 years and happily doing this? So from a work perspective, there's a lot of exciting projects. We've got measures, we've got the buy-in from Vodacom that is coming in, that's the restructuring or right-sizing exercise that we're busy with, which are really exciting. But the jury's still out on who am I becoming and where do I see myself really in the next couple of years, you know. So I've just come back from a 3-week silent meditation retreat, and I'm spending a lot of time with myself, you know, to come up with those answers.
Fantastic. Well, I hope Dark Fiber Africa is actively listening. We've all been actively listening. The participants in the webinar have all been actively listening. There's been incredible engagements in the chat, lots of questions, people still going on. We've got another panel on retention and the Great Resignation on the 7th of June at the HR Ndaba online. So if you're not registered for that, please rectify that in the next 20 minutes. You can just Google HR Ndaba and boom, you can register and you'll be there with us. But for now, I'm gonna thank, there's lots more to talk about, don't get me wrong, but let's stick to the time. Lots of people have 12 o'clock engagements. So I'm gonna thank you, Bandile, Portia and Michelle for your time, for your insights, for your honesty, and for actively sharing all your insights and your journeys. Thanks to Workday for making it possible. And I'm looking forward to engaging with you in the future again. Thanks everyone for turning up today in good numbers, and see you all at the HR Ndaba online on the 7th of June.
Thank you for the invite. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.